Dr. Oyesiku, how nice it is to see you.
Nice to see you, Dr. Selman.
I want to thank you and also extend a welcome to our listeners to the AANS Leaders in Neurosurgery series, of which I have the honor of interviewing you, to let the audience know a little bit about what makes you tick, if that's okay with you.
Well, I have over the years tried to figure that one out. And I think it's just a joie de vivre, the joy of being alive and being able to participate in all the good things, work, play, family, leisure. So that joy of being alive and well and able to participate in all those things is really what gets me going to start the day off.
Well, excellent. What a great way to start, Dr. Oyesiku. If you don't mind, also, I think I'm going to give our listeners just a little bit of an introduction about yourself before we get into some questions that I know that they'll be eager to hear the answers to. So by way of a formal introduction, Dr. Oyesiku was born in Nigeria, where he graduated from St. Gregory's College, and he received his medical degree from the University of Ibadan. He then attended the University of London in the United Kingdom as a Commonwealth Scholar. He there obtained a Master's of Science degree, and then he did his neurosurgery training at Emory University in Atlanta. During his residency, he also obtained a PhD studying the role of neurotrophic factors in neuronal survival and regeneration. Dr. Oyesiku then joined the neurosurgery faculty at Emory upon completion of his training. Soon after joining the faculty, he received a Clinical Investigator Development Award from the NIH and a Medical Faculty Development Award from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. And ultimately, soon after that, he secured his own R01 to study molecular imaging and targeting of pituitary tumors. And I know we'll hear more about that in just a little bit. During his time at Emory, Nelson rose to the rank of Professor of Neurological Surgery and Endocrinology, and he held the inaugural Daniel Lewis Barrow Chair in Neurosurgery. He served as vice chairman of the department, and I know he's very proud of being the director of the neurosurgical residency program. Dr. Oyesiku is currently the Van L. Weatherspoon Jr., eminent professor and chair of the Department of Neurological Surgery and professor of endocrinology at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. As I mentioned, his clinical and research focus remains the surgical treatment and molecular biology of pituitary tumors. In recognition of this work, he was awarded the Gentle Giant Award from the Pituitary Tumor Network Association. Now, Dr. Oyesiku has served our neurosurgery community in many ways. He has been the chair of the American Board of Neurological Surgery, a member of the Neurosurgical Residency Review Committee, and president of the Congress of Neurological Surgery. He is the immediate past editor-in-chief of Neurosurgery, which, as we know, is the official journal of the Congress, and that position he held for 13 years. His extraordinary service to that organization resulted in his receiving the Distinguished Service Award from the Congress of Neurological Surgeons in 2021. He also has held leadership positions in the Federation for International Education in Neurosurgery, the Georgia Neurosurgical Society, the Society of Neurological Surgeons, and the World Federation of Neurological Surgeons, and currently serves as president of the World Federation. Dr. Oyesiku is also a member of the Neurosurgical Society Equanimous, and I hope we'll hear more about that later. Finally, I would like our viewers to know that in 2019, Dr. Oyesiku was decorated as Surgeon-in-Chief by the paramount ruler of Ibadan, the capital city of Nigeria's southwestern Ogun State, to honor his efforts as an ambassador of the community. Now, Nelson, by any measure, this is simply a remarkable set of achievements for any one individual. So I'd imagine the first question that folks who will be listening to this will ask is, first, why neurosurgery? What are the salient experiences in your life that brought you into our field of neurosurgery? In simple terms, how did you become who you are?
Thank you so much, Warren. That's a great introduction, and thank you very much for your eloquent delivery as well. So the first question, as you pose, why neurosurgery, takes us back to many years ago, many decades ago, as a little boy in Lagos, Nigeria, growing up and watching television in the early evenings, and I came upon a program, a medical drama series on ABC at the time, known as Ben Casey. And it ran in the early 60s, and it used to come on at about 9 o'clock, just when my mom was asking me to go off to bed. This medical drama series, Ben Casey, left such an indelible impression on me. It was a story about a resident, a neurosurgical resident, get this, in somewhere in San Francisco. I assume San Francisco General, but I'm not so sure about that. In any event, these were the trials and tribulations and day in the life kind of an approach to chronicling Ben Casey. And it had this iconic opening credits where you had this invisible hand drawing on a chalkboard with a piece of white chalk, man, woman, the symbols, tracing them out: man, woman, birth, death, and infinity. And anyway, I watched tons of episodes of Ben Casey, played by Vince Edwards, who of course has long since passed. But you can still see it on YouTube, actually, if you want to watch old episodes. And so that's what got me clued in first into medicine, and more specifically neurosurgery. And later on, as I went through school and so on, it stuck. And as you rightly noted, I went to St. Gregory's and had an exemplary academic record, and then picked University of Ibadan for medicine. And at the University of Ibadan, I came under the influence of a man by the name of Latunde Odeku, who had trained at Michigan with Eddie Kahn, and had been offered a job to remain at Ann Arbor. He was Nigerian by birth, and he declined the offer because he wanted to come back home to serve his own people. And he came back to the University of Ibadan and was professor of neurosurgery, the first West African professor of neurosurgery. And so he lived only for about a year after I met him. He died of complications of diabetes, believe it or not. And anyway, Latunde was a brilliant man, wonderful surgeon, class act. In addition to him, I also came under the influence of a neurologist who gave the most incredible descriptions of the pathways of the brain, brainstem and spinal cord. And he would rattle off these syndromes that nobody and their brother could pronounce. And as a result of the two of them, I decided that I would pursue my dreams to become a surgeon. And fast forward a few more years, here we are. And I left the University of Ibadan for England as a Commonwealth scholar. And I spent a year there getting a master's in occupational medicine. And one evening, comes back to something I will mention once again, is the influence of serendipity. One evening, I came to see a friend of mine who had just come back from the United States. And he persuaded me that if I wanted to pursue my dreams to be a neurosurgeon, that the best place was America. And the next morning, I went and bought all the books I could find to prepare for the ECFMG examinations, which I then took, and the rest, as they say, is history.
Well, Nelson, that is an incredible story. I must admit, I watched a fair bit of Ben Casey myself, so I think many of our audience members will remember that, and probably, as you mentioned, still see it on YouTube. Quite an inspiration. But now that you've told us the why, can you shed a little bit on the how? Those are really incredibly diverse experiences. How did you mold your experience into what you wanted it to be? How did you overcome obstacles in your way?
Yes. So when I started my training, I was very fortunate in that after several applications to residency training, all came up short. I was given an opportunity to train at Emory. And again, the word serendipity comes to mind. I was very fortunate in that the resident who was a PGY1 completing his internship declined to continue as a PGY2 in favor of going into cardiothoracic surgery. And so I interviewed at Emory and doing through the match, intending and hoping to match as a PGY1, although by that time I'd done my general surgery training. And so this young resident intern declined to go ahead into PGY2, and that spot was offered to me, and I took it. And I became a resident at Emory, came under the influence of Dr. George Tyndall, who was my chair at the time. But beyond him, a number of great faculty, his wife, Susie Tyndall, Dan Barrow, who and I became fast friends over the ensuing decades. And as a result of which, I became a resident at Emory, which was far surpassing my wildest dreams. And went through the residency program. I was very keen on scientific training. So I pursued a PhD thesis whilst a resident at Emory in neurosurgery. And my thesis was in neuroscience, as you rightly pointed out. And as a fourth year resident, PGY4, I asked Dr. Tyndall if I could, take over the pituitary practice. And he was, of course, about passed out thinking this young fellow has really aspirations. And as a result, he took it very kindly, and he said, if you want to do this, you need to stick with me, which I did. And I was offered a position on the faculty when I completed my training and became a surgeon scientist. I shadowed Dr. Tyndall, and a few years later, when he stepped down, I took over the pituitary practice at Emory. And as a result of my scientific training, I applied for grants in career development grants through the NIH, and I got a KO8, which allowed me to underwrite my time, underwrite my laboratory, and took off and built upon the success of Dr. Tyndall in the clinical space, plus the research component that I brought with it. And that focus on that and on both the science and the clinical space was really the core of my faculty development. And from the KO8, that morphed into an R01, and I got interested in leadership as a result of people like Dan Barrow, who was on his trajectory, as you know, and became involved in things like the Georgia Neurosurgical Society, the American College, the Congress of Neurological Surgeons, and then ultimately the board and the RRC, and enjoyed some modest success in academic neurosurgery. So that's kind of how it unfolded. A lot of serendipity along the way, a lot of help from a lot of mentors and supporters and people who just wanted to give you a chance, and that was key to my advancement.
Well, typically modest response, and thank you for that. But, Nelson, we're about to head into the Easter and Passover holiday season. And I know you've heard me discuss the concept of dayenu in the Passover service before. The word dayenu roughly translates into, it would have been enough. Now, in your case, it would have been enough if you were a gifted surgeon, or it would have been enough if you were a great clinician scientist. Finally, it would have been enough if you were a superb educator, administrator, and leader. But to excel in all those roles while remaining the humble man that I have come to know and call friend, well, that is truly remarkable. So again, can you delve a little bit deeper into that and tell our audience what motivates you?
I think I would put at the very top of the list expectations. What do I mean by that? Expectations of your parents, expectations of your teachers and your mentors. I've always felt that I had somebody on the on my shoulder, looking and making sure that I was living up to expectations. It was almost like you had that little angel Clarence in it's a Wonderful Life right on your shoulder, prompting you along and saying, gee, what would mom think about that? What would dad think about that? And what would, this teacher or that teacher think about that? So expectations have been a great motivator for me over the years. Even when I haven't felt that something was worth doing or needed to be done, this little voice in the back of my head would say, but really, you really should do that. They would be proud of you, wouldn't they? But, and so on. So I think expectations would be at the top of the list for me. I think also a desire for excellence, being able to show that you accomplish something, something important, something consequential, something seminal, something that people would be proud of and talk about. And every time something like that has happened, it has just reinforced that culture and that feeling inside. And then I would also add the opportunity to help others live their own dreams, in any small way. Maybe it's a letter of recommendation, maybe it's a phone call, maybe it's showing someone how to do this or tie a knot or whatever it is. I've always taken joy from helping someone realize some dream in any little way, form, or shape. And it has taken many forms and shapes. Everything from showing someone, an intern, how to tie a knot to, writing a letter for a recommendation for someone who's getting a tenured professorship. So that has always been in the background of my motivation is to help someone else live their own dream or take one little step to their dream, however little that may be.
Well, excellent. That is certainly a great motivator for you, and I'm sure for others as well. As you've mentioned, though, you have done a lot and you get satisfaction from all those roles, but there is a concept of balance. How do you keep balance in your life? These roles are great, but they certainly come with their own stresses, whether it's in the clinical environment or a leadership role or education. How do you put things into balance, and how do you make that all work?
Yes, and I think we're all very guilty of running on fumes in multiple directions at once. And in today's day and age, with all the emphasis on wellness and the acceptance of the benefits of work-life balance, I think it takes even more importance. But what I've found that has helped me is the ability to switch off. People want, and by that I mean, don't take it home with you if it's work to home. Don't take it with you if it's work to the golf course. Switch off whatever you were doing last and switch on to what you want to do now. Whether it's going home and having a nice cocktail, switching off, reading the Sunday New York Times on Sunday and not worrying about the journal Neurosurgery, switching off. Taking a walk in the neighborhood late in the evening or early in the morning and not worrying about what meeting you have to go to at 9 a.m., be damned. That ability to switch off has been really good for me. And even when I haven't been able to take prolonged time off work or something like that, the ability to just go from one thing to another and leave the other thing behind, so that you don't have this cumulative abundance of stressors all at once, constantly nugging at you, and you can focus on one thing at a time, whether it's taking a power nap in the middle of the day, having a scotch at the end of the day, whatever it is, you face the issue at hand and leave the others behind.
Well, and great advice again, Professor, but I know there are some things that give you particular pleasure, and perhaps I can expand on those a little bit for our audience, and maybe you could tell me how they've made it into your life and stayed into your life. So For those who don't know, for Nelson, football is played with a round ball, not an oblong ball. And he was quite gifted himself. But over the years that I've known him, I've come to rely on him for many things, but in particular is getting an update on the World Cup. And if anybody remembers, there are certain color commentators to sports that are just incredible. Hayward Hale-Brune comes to mind for CBS, Howard Cosell for Monday Night Football, and more recently, we lost one of the great reporters in soccer or football was Grant Wall, who had covered many of the World Cups. But Dr. Oyesiku himself has covered, I believe, the past 8 World Cup soccer matches, and provided those of us who either we consider him a friend or he considers us a friend or just interested, has really given commentary on every single game in a depth that if we had more time in this interview, I would read what he had to say about the games, but it is certainly enlightening and with an enthusiasm that's just unrivaled. So Nelson, tell us a little bit about what the world of football means to you.
Well, football is religion. It's passion. It's fun. It's everything you would imagine a spectacle, global spectacle. It's a game that's played everywhere, in every corner of the world, from the beaches of Rio to the streets of Los Angeles. And in between. It is truly a global sport. I started following football when I was a young kid, and I played, with a crunched up ball, and as I followed the leagues and the teams across the world, I became very passionate about the one tournament that most people know called the World Cup. And the first World Cup I ever saw was in 1970. It was a seminal game. Tournament where Brazil, the great Pelé played in that World Cup, and of course one of the legendary finals. And that was the first time I saw a World Cup final. And in 1994, you may recall, the World Cup was hosted by the United States, and that was the first time I was able to purchase my own tickets and go in live to see the matches. And I have another passion, which is writing, and I love the beauty and the joy of construction of stories and writing. And so the two of those merged. And I became a color commentator in writing for the World Cup, and I would follow the matches, every match, and write a short, pithy blurb, and I would distribute them, as a correspondent would to subscribers who were my friends, of course, and I've done that. I've done that for the last 8 World Cups, and just most recently in Qatar. And it's been a wonderful experience traveling the world, the United States in 94, France in 98, 2002 was in Japan and Korea, 2006 was in Germany, 2010 was in Brazil, 2014 and South Africa, and so on till now. And I've often toyed of the idea of writing a book and using my comments and as the bedrock for it, writing a book about football, and then using my commentaries on the World Cup as part of that whole story. So I love the game. It's a wonderful sport. Over 5 billion and counting watched the last World Cup final, which pretty impressive.
Well, part of that book, I'm sure, would be woven into your philosophy as well. So let me just share with our listeners one of the little missives that you sent out recently at the end. So KG Croatia contains the samba dancers and choreographs the proceedings. This is the magic of World Cup. This is football. And by now, you better believe that anything can happen, and impossible is nothing. So Nelson, I'm sure that is part of your philosophy as well.
Yes, indeed. Impossible is indeed nothing. And I think life experiences have shown that.
Well, you know, Nelson, in our roles, we have done a lot of interviews. One that sticks in my memory is when my son was applying to a Jesuit university here in Cleveland, named after the first Catholic bishop in the United States, John Carroll. And I still remember to this day the question that one of the sisters asked potential students, and that was, what do you want your legacy to be? So now that we are approaching the end of our chat today, I would like to pose the same question to you. What do you want your legacy to be?
You know, in the journey of life, we meet people. We meet people. Some we'll never meet again. Some we make a consequential impression on. Some we like, some we don't. My one wish, as a legacy, if you will, is if the people I've crossed paths with on the voyage of life or walked along with remember something that was good about that meeting, that interaction, whatever it may have been. It may have been a shared lager, fine. Maybe it was a nice conversation about the weather, fine. Maybe we exchanged observations about science, fine. Whatever it is that interaction was, I dearly wish that whoever that person was remembers me fondly and says, gee, I ran into that young fellow or this man or that person, and God, what a nice fellow that person was, or how he helped me or did this or did that. So that would be great, for people to remember you well for something. It wouldn't matter what, but to remember you well, that would be great. I would love to have that, leave Earth as that my legacy, that, you know, that meeting, that interaction was good. Remember me well.
Well, Nelson, I am sure that everyone feels the same way that I do, perhaps except for one unfortunate meal with Coquille Saint-Jacques. But other than that, I am sure everyone remembers you well for all that you have done for us. So I'd like to thank you for really sharing so openly everything that has made you you. I know the audience will be appreciative, and I'd like to thank our audience for their attention.
Thank you very much, Warren, and thank you for sharing your time this wonderful afternoon. Remember me well.
I will remember you well, my friend. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.